Light in the Dark by Holly Bromley. Look deep into nature and then you will understand everything. Albert Einstein. Brilliant golden hues unfold over the vast ocean like a sky god's celebratory streamers, heralding the new day. The sea lay still as if holding its breath, its heartbeat the steady rhythm of the lapping waves, barely shifting the sandbed. Today, the only beneficiaries of this beauty were Sam and a couple of wheeling silver gulls, who broke the sheen of the sea as they dove for their breakfast. From where Sam stood, it was like looking through a pale green glass bottle to the bottom of the sea, where pink starfish and spiny urchins rested on the broad leaves of the sea tangle. Sam scrunched his toes, feeling the gritty sensation of the sand, still damp from the retreating tide. He reached his wide palms up to the sky and stretched his long, lithe body out, feeling the stiffness of sleep fall from his form. Sam loved to rise early and head through the jungle to his hidden beach to breathe in the first rays of sunlight as they cracked over the horizon, feel the strength of their light warm his dark skin. There was magic in those first moments of the new day, and he liked to capture it and hold it as his own. He'd received another treat this morning as he'd climbed through the dense dance of vines near one of the last standing equilaria trees. He'd spotted a male bird of paradise starting its mating ritual. He'd quietly climbed up into the tree to watch. The movement of this bird's elongated and elaborate back and the turquoise plumage was so entrancing that for a moment time stood still, and Sam jumped when a screeching monkey raced by, bringing him to his senses and the dance to an end. Sam had lived on this island his whole life. He knew every part of it like the back of his hand, just like his father had. The person who had taught Sam more than anything, Nio Abel, had been a forest guide. Papua New Guinea was a paradise for international researchers who were drawn to one of the most culturally diverse and least explored ecosystems in the world. Anthropologists were fascinated by the fact that most of the people were still rural dwellers, and amongst the communities 852 languages were spoken. Naiho would lead scientists, botanists, zoologists, mycologists, entomologists, lepidoptimists, primatologists and others through the rainforest, whilst answering their questions and sharing his knowledge. 2 years ago, Naiho had been killed in a tribal war. The neighbouring tribe declared Naiho had brought devastation to their village when he'd led the last group of scientists through. Things had been happening since then that couldn't be explained. Trees dying, ongoing floods. Naiho's death was considered deserved retribution. Since that day, the job of providing for his mother, brother and 2 sisters had fallen on Sam's shoulders. Sam's mother, Christina Abel, like most Papua New Guinean women, cooked, cleaned, took care of the children and grew the household vegetables. Plantains, yams, ginger, tomatoes and sweet potatoes. She'd raised her children to be strong and determined and to value education. Her wisdom reigned over her children like a lion, king of their jungle. Her kindness as rare as a Queen Alexandra's birdwing butterfly. Sam knew it was his duty, but he struggled leaving behind the freedom of his childhood to follow the daily routines of fishing and labour and council meetings. At 14, he wasn't the only young man, but he still hated hearing other boys his age laughing about their adventures. Sam had never liked change. The unknown often made him feel fearful. However, most grown-ups, despite many not being able to read, knew the laws of nature and helped him make sense. His father knew the deeper mysteries. Once Sam had come home from the rainforest fearful of evil spirits. He had discovered a petrified line of ants, each with a growth sprouting from its head. Naiho had shared with him what the scientist Dr. Graham Mackey had taught him about Orpheocordyceps unilateralis. This fungi had an unusual way of reproducing itself through infecting ants. Its spores would enter the ants' bodies, stun and kill them by growing long fruited bodies up through their heads. These bizarre antennae would rupture and release the fungus's spores, and so through death, life was perpetuated. Once he'd narrowly missed the fall of an old redwood. He'd heard the cracking sound, starting from the ground and then filling the whole sky. He'd run from it, and as he turned to look back, he'd see the giant descend from above and crash through to the ground below. It ripped a jagged hole in the distant canopy. The clouds of green and now the harsh light shone into the shadows. It seemed so brutal, but essential, his father had told him. The great race, Sam. Watch as each new plant fights to take that space. Who will win? Remember, in light there is a seed of darkness, and the darkness is a seed of light. After Naiho had learnt about the concept of yin and yang from researcher Dr. Wan Cheng, he had had the black and white yin-yang symbol tattooed on his arm. Sam wished he could still trace his finger over that symbol on his father's arm, look up into his smiling weathered face, and hear his wise words. He yearned for his father's strength and guidance. Sam now faced a challenge he couldn't meet. After his father's death, the destruction in the neighbouring village had actually worsened, not improved. Now his village, slightly higher than theirs, was also flooding, and many of the neighbouring tribes had had to move. Sam was being called on to explain why, but he didn't want to talk in front of all the men. He was scared by their tough manner and sometimes flaring tempers. He knew things that they didn't, things that the scientists had told him about climate change and global warming. He knew that they had to change their practices of cutting down the rainforest trees, and that they had to think about a new future, maybe higher on the island. But he didn't want to do that now. Up to now, he had fended off their urging, persistent requests. He pushed these thoughts aside and headed up the sand dunes away from the beach, the fine grains of sand now dry underfoot. Their warm yellow glow made him wonder whether the sunshine itself was trapped inside. Through a wild grove of banana palms, he was now looking out over another little bay from the top of the gnarled cliff. Its rough, exposed side reminded him of the old men's chins, bumpy and scarred. He thought of them sitting around discussing the village's future, and he felt his body tighten. Down below his feet, the now hungry sea gnawed at the belly of the cliff. He took a deep breath and leapt off the edge. For a moment he felt himself flying like a bird, and then splash. The cool water raced up and embraced him. He sunk down and opened his eyes. He could see the sunlight playing on the water's surface above his head as he went down deeper and deeper. The water got darker and colder, and then he felt the bottom touch his feet. He bent up his knees and allowed his body to land cross-legged on the pebbly bottom. He let out bubble after bubble and watched them rise from his face, getting ever larger until they reached the surface and burst. He let his body go limp and felt the motion of the ocean gently sway him on his seat. And then suddenly he put his feet on the bottom and pushed off, shooting up to the top and bursting through the surface with a spray of water. He lay on his back and floated on the surface, feeling his body move as one with the ocean. In the heavens above, the rosy tint still doused the clouds near the horizon, but the sky had become a brilliant blue. Sam rolled over onto his front and swam powerfully to the shore. He quickly pulled himself from the ocean and strode up the beach, back through the jungle, to the village hall.